everyone. Welcome to today's lecture. Today we're going to talk about sociological theories and the application to education. When we talk about theories, we're not just talking about abstract ideas, philosophical ideas. We are trying to dig deep and try to understand how education affects society and how society affects education. Sociological theories will answer important questions. For example, why do some students succeed easily in class while others struggle? And how can we make sure those who are struggling are supported? So let's dive right into it. Sociological theories give us tools to analyze education beyond the surface. They help us see the classroom not just as a place for teaching, but as a space where society is actually reproduced. Society is challenged and sometimes even transformed. Take, for instance, the typical classroom at Kibabi University, where we ordinarily have students from different ethnic backgrounds, learning together and working together. A sociologist might ask, is this classroom promoting unity or quietly reinforcing inequality? These theories help us ask better questions. And as you may well guess, better questions lead to better solutions. We begin with the consensus theories. These theories assume that society works best when there's stability and shared values. And therefore they argue that social norms and values are essential and that change happens gradually and peacefully. Or variously put, change is an evolution and not a revolution. It also sees education as a tool for maintaining social order. Think of students singing the national anthem every morning when they assemble. And I'd like to draw your attention to some of the lines in our national anthem. May we dwell in unity, peace, and liberty. You see, this line is loaded with a lot of meaning. The students are telling each other that they are going to promote peaceful coexistence no matter what. So singing the anthem is not just a routine practice at school, but it's actually a ritual that reinforces civil, or what we call civic identity. We are one people. We might coexist. Kenya's competency-based education curriculum is another example because it promotes national cohesion by teaching practical skills and values aligned with development goals. Now, let's flip the lens and discuss conflict theories. Conflict theories from thinkers like Karl Marx and Max Weber argue that society is shaped by struggles over power and resources. They believe that education serves the interest of the dominant class and that inequality is reproduced through schooling. Compare a private school in a rich suburb like in Karen, Nairobi, with a public school in, say, Bukananachi, around here in Bungoma. The resource gap isn't just about infrastructure. It reflects deeper social inequalities. Conflict theory also explains gender disparities. In some regions, girls face barriers like early marriage, most of them forced marriages. Lack of sanitary facilities also make learning unpleasant in some instances. Cultural restrictions make it harder for girls to attend school. So what does this tell you? It tells me, at least, that education isn't neutral. It's political. The example I've given of a school in Karen in the leafy suburbs of Nairobi with a lot of resources, high qualified teachers, modern laboratories, cannot be compared with a school in Bukananachi where students are struggling with even the basic of things. Now let's shift to evolutionary theory. Thinkers like Comte, Durkheim, and Marx saw society as evolving from simple to complex. These theories say that Education adapts to societal progress, and that social change requires educational adjustments. Take Kibabi University's entrepreneurship courses as an example. They reflect this shift, and that is adapting to a market-driven economy that teach entrepreneurship, even in the teacher education program, teach entrepreneurial skills so that when these graduates are out there, they can go and do something on their own, not going to be part of the problem, be part of the solution. That you are going to make sure you can do something on your own and not depend on the government to give you employment. So you are looking at the shifting job market. And when secondary schools introduce coding and media studies, they are responding to the demands of the digital world. See, that's an evolution in action. On the other hand, neo-evolutionary theory builds on this by emphasizing how education helps societies adapt to transformations, whether technological, cultural, it may be economic. How do you adapt? Now, structural functionalism views society as an organism with interdependent parts. It argues that education institutions exist to maintain stability and that schools promote social integration and meet societal needs. Imagine a school as a living system. The head teacher is the brain, for instance. Teachers are the legs, they make things happen. And students are the cells. We are in schools because of students. If one part fails, you guess right, the whole system suffers. I've seen schools in many places in this country hosting health drives, doing community service, conducting agricultural trainings. This obviously is serving broader societal functions beyond academics. We are going beyond the four walls of the classroom and offering important services to the community where we come from. Because schools do not exist in a vacuum. Well, symbolic interactionism, on the other hand, zooms in on everyday interactions. Thinkers like Mead and Cooley say human behavior is shaped by meaning attached to symbols, and that classroom interaction shapes students' identity. Picture a teacher who praises one student and ignores another. Over time, those students develop very different self-images, and your guess is as good as mine. The one who is praised might think of themselves as being very good. The one who is not, or who is, talked down, they might think themselves are not being good enough. Marxist and neo-Marxist theory sharpen the conflict lens, because they argue that schools are tools for the ruling class to control knowledge, and that education reinforces class inequality and justifies the status quo. For instance, if history lessons glorify colonial figures but ignore resistance movements like Mau Mau movement, like the Maji Maji rebellion, to name a few, students internalize a biased narrative. And so they believe that schools actually reinforce class inequality. Sometimes the schooling system makes sure that the rich continue being rich and the poor continue being poor. Rich kids go to good schools, well-funded, and they have very good prospects. Poor kids go to poor schools, and to just make average grades to go to the university is a struggle. But when English is prioritized and over indigenous languages, there are schools that prioritize English. And I think we are in a society that glorifies English, and we put English ahead of all other languages. The trouble with this is that it promotes global capitalism while eroding local identity. People need to be identified by their language. Language carries culture, and this is what Julius Nyerere was saying in his socialist movement, that try and make sure that you learn other languages in relation to ours. Now, how are these theories applicable in education? How do sociological theories explain educational challenges? These theories help understand issues like inequality and access to education. For instance, we've given the example of well-funded schools and poor schools. What this portends for us is sometimes in capitalist economies, the poor have it a lot easier and they are poised for success, while the rich are poised for success and the poor are doomed to fail just by their background. Conflict theory explains education inequality between genders. Why is it that in most developing countries there is a gender disparity between girls and boys? Why is it that in many countries participation rates for girls is much lower than that for boys? Part of it is culture. Culture that restricts girls to go to school. Part of it is attitude of parents, thinking that girls will be married away and therefore they are not beneficial to the family. Now, socialization theories focus on how education shapes behavior and identity, and they argue that schools teach cultural values and societal norms, and that education transmits social roles and fosters behavior. Now, let's go to a school setting, group work, which is very important in a school setting. School uniforms, even going for assemblies at specific times. What does this do to students? Students early on in life learn ideals like cooperation. They learn discipline. They learn respect. In rural Bungoma, storytelling and proverbs aren't just used for entertainment, and I think even elsewhere in the country. They are tools, important tools for teaching moral lessons and social expectations. So in a nutshell, class, education doesn't just prepare students for exams, it actually prepares them for life. Closely tied to socialization is cultural transmission. And this theory says that schools pass on cultural knowledge and values, and that education ensures conformity to societal expectations. Think of how rural schools use songs, dances, and local stories to teach tradition. These aren't just lessons, they are cultural inheritance that future generations will do the same. They'll use the same songs, they'll use the same dances, they'll use the same storytelling techniques to teach important values. So whether it's language, dress code, or moral teaching, schools reinforce the norms that holds community together. Now, let's be a little bit critical. Sociological theories are powerful, very powerful, but they're not perfect. They have limitations. Like overemphasis on societal forces may actually ignore individual agency. Also, some theories are too generalized to apply across diverse contexts. Contexts differ. What applies in one situation might not actually apply in others. For instance, when we say that children from poor backgrounds might not actually succeed in schools because of that background, there's always the exceptions. There's always an exception to every rule that, these students might actually work very hard to run away from poverty, to make sure that they are not like their parents. So their reinforcement is negative, but reinforcement nonetheless. So they are working hard to better their lives. Now, postmodernism challenges grand narratives and fixed categorizations. While feminist theorists also highlight gender experiences and powerful dynamics, gender plays an important role here. Feminism believes that gender is an important factor in education. class, we wrap up by saying that sociological theories matter in education. And we've looked at how consensus theory promotes unity, how conflict and Marxist theories expose inequality, how evolutionary theories explain educational change, how structural functionalism sees education as a stabilizer, how symbolic interactionism reveals the power of everyday interaction, how socialization and cultural transmission shape identity and behavior, and how theories guide reform and where they fall short. Well, each theory we've looked at helps us to understand better the way education works. Sometimes they don't work in isolation. They work together to give us a bigger picture of how education works in a particular system. Now you'll find more comprehensive notes on this topic on your learning management system, where you can download the video, you can also download the slides, and you can have the comprehensive notes where you can revise. And if you have any questions, please let us engage each other on the discussion forums in the LMS. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.